My name's Akansh, and I'm going to be filming this video today to kind of walk through what I did last month to get the results that I did. Huge inspiration from Orion Clog. So I've been watching a lot of your videos, man, on YouTube, and I think they're super dope. It's very tactical and transparent, something that's kind of lacking in the info space. And so I'm trying to replicate something like that in today's video. To give some context, I'm at a B2C ROI company. So the offer is an ROI based offer, it's a B2C company. And what we really do over there, I'll kind of get into my role in a second, but just to walk through the acquisition process. From my understanding, there's an ad and it goes to pretty much a 90-minute video, a webinar, right? Evergreen webinar. Then people are told to pretty much buy the 2K front end. If they want to book a call with someone, that would be like the front end closer. And if they don't end up buying, then they'll just get retargeting emails until they buy the downsell, which is 997. They get into the actual, so that's the front end. And then really the name of the game is taking the front end and then upselling them into the 7800 back end. So last month, the month of May 2025, was my second full month of the company. Brought in 218K front end cash, 240 total, somewhere around there. And really, my role is I'm actually taking people who've got come into the front end and then taking them to the back end, not the actual closing aspect, but pretty much getting them from onboarding all the way to the actual booking them in. So here's a quick snapshot, I guess, of where I was last month. So second on the leaderboard, 218, 243 net cash. Uh, Scrolling a bit further down. So this is kind of my track, and I'm going to go through everywhere where I should be giving credit. So this tracker comes from closes.io, from Cole Gordon's company. And this is kind of just a tracker to show the show rate, sets close. There isn't much to really talk about here. I guess this is just overall context on the types of inputs. So it was 72 bookings, the show rate, set rate, off close rate, number of deals. It's missing 3 deals. It was actually on 38. And then you can see rev and cash. All right, so this is what's going to be super important. So we've got 5 things on the right over here. These 5 things are the week by week, what the stats look like. And then on the left is another track, and we'll kind of like oscillate, go one. We'll look at the right-hand side, then kind of refer back to the left-hand side. And just so that it's super clear, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the weeks move in this order. So this first week is pretty much this week. And then this second week is this week. This third week is this week, etc. All right, so let's start with the very first week. So the very first week I was lost. Reason being is the week before, which was the last week of April, I was actually at SalesCon. So that entire week I was out. So I didn't have like a a pipeline of deals like the other reps did on the team. So I was kind of playing a bit of catch up. So there's not much to say there, to be honest, no units at all. And then we start the first full week that I'm back. So this week, there wasn't much changes really to kind of explain what I do in terms of my process is, so we get onboarding calls. So once someone actually purchases the mid ticket, also the front end, they're immediately required to book their actual onboarding call. Or as they log into the portal after watching the first video, they're once again required to book that first call. So that's kind of what we do. We take those inbound, and then also it's a combination of a lot of outbound, right? So hitting up students and going through workflows and dialing them. Anyone who's pretty much brought the front end and who haven't actually ascended, or even the ones who have ascended and then just renewing them after however long period it was that they bought. Sometimes we do 12 months, sometimes we do 6 months. So that's kind of the efforts that I go, or like the types of leads that I'm pretty much going after. As for the second week, pretty straightforward. There wasn't any rocket science to this. Ended up second for that week, 50% conversion, 9 units, 50K cash. And kind of looking over here, what that meant was, so the first week, right, there were no deals. So that's why it's 0. Pretty much this number, okay, so we'll just look at this number should reflect units. This is the conversion percentage. So there's nothing week 1. Week 2, 83%, which is relatively high. And then we move on to the third week. So the third week, what had happened, and this is actually a huge learning lesson that I had, was my conversion was probably the lowest on the team. And I had a lot of students assigned, and I kind of didn't convert. I was middle of the pack. To give some context, so right after the second week finished, I was actually flying from Dallas back home to Melbourne, at least for the time being. And on that super long flight, I downloaded a ton of calls from different reps, a rep who was doing really well last month, and then another rep who was actually on their way to doing very well. She actually ended up being the top rep for the month and absolutely crushed like 300K plus. But I downloaded a handful of both of their calls and was just listening to their calls. And that's where the mistake comes into play. I was trying to emulate someone else who had a proven process, but I didn't quite understand conceptually what they were doing. And on a very surface level, was just trying to use the words that they were using and the flow that they were using without really understanding why. And it actually did more harm than good. And it clearly shows in the stats over here in week 3. And then if you kind of also look over here, so this was week 1, there is a bit of a delay, I should also say, to explain why. Because week 3 over here, you can see that I have a 42% conversion. It's really week 4 where it dropped. To explain why there's a bit of delay between this and this graph is, think of it like this. So when we get assigned a student, let's say in the 3rd week, then they need to book a call with us, which could be maybe 24 to 48 hours. And then we actually set them for the second call, which could be another 24 to 48 hours. So you're probably looking at, on the low end, 2 days, more like 4, 5, 6 days before the actual call goes live. And so all the students that got assigned in this 3rd week, they kind of landed in that 4th week. And that really shows that lower conversion of 34%. Now, sometime during the middle of this week, I had a handful of one-on-ones. I also was spending quite a bit of time on Claude to really try to break down my calls and where I was going wrong. And one of the main things we noticed is, as I was trying to replicate this other person, this other rep on the team, when I was pitching, I was just using analogies. And don't get me wrong, analogies are amazing, but I wasn't really making it very tactical. Like, the analogies were very up in the air. So it's very hard for a student or a client to kind of understand how further investing into themselves, right? Actually, the back end, how is that going to assist them to move them towards their goals? Because it wasn't very granular. There wasn't that, pretty much they couldn't picture the return on investment. That's the way I should explain it. So we changed up a handful of things. I made it a lot more tactical, made it a lot more concrete. When I say concrete, it's not like just going deliverable after deliverable. It was more still remaining high level with their goals and what they're looking to do, but explaining more specifically how the process is going to kind of get them there. And what happened with that is, so that was week 3. Then we were looking to week 4 and week 5. So week 4 ended up second with around 51K cash, 45% conversion. And then week 5 ended up at 82% conversion. So that's actually the highest on the team. And then around 77K cash. And so to also add another thing, what you'll see in this last week is a lot of people on an average kind of was in the 70s, right? We got 80s, 70s. And that's because we actually did something in the last week or so, or towards the tail end of the second last week, where we pretty much did a workshop for all existing students who weren't in the back end. And it was a lot of kind of indoctrination and kind of warming them up and pretty much interviewing a client who had actually gone from just being in the front end to then going into the back end, and the types of results they saw. And so with that, it actually helped a lot when it came to bringing in cash. It kind of reflects in this last thing where it was 9 units, 81% conversion rate. And so that was pretty much the last and final week. So really my takeaway was, with that final week, to kind of stick with what I know and try to, rather than replicating what other students are doing. It's always great to listen to other calls and what other reps are doing, but just focus on your style and trying to make those small tweaks and small incremental improvements based on your performance. And then the last thing I do want to talk about is this graph. So this is Brian Choi. He's a legend as well. So I've actually tweaked up his tracker. Doesn't look like this. It's really just this and this. I've added this section. I'm going to go into it right now. We'll first start. We'll first start with the top section. Then we'll go middle. Then we'll go bottom. The right hand side isn't as important. So pretty much what I would do every day, so not every day, but at the start of the week, what I would actually do is count how many days were remaining in the month. And then I would also pretty much take how much cash I still had to collect to get to the set projection, right? To actually hit projections, divide it by the number of days, and that would give me how much cash I would need to collect on a daily basis. So this you could think as your daily projections. And then obviously I would find the front end revenue because we don't collect 100% cash, and then kind of work out the input output equation based on my stats. There's a worst case and best case scenario. The best case is if my stats were to improve to where I kind of expect them over the next month, what I would have to do in input. So as you can see, I would require a lot less slots open, a lot less calls needed to be taken, etc., because my skill set would have been better. So that kind of gives me that. Now, what I do with that is then I move on to the second part, which is now not my daily projection, but my weekly projection, right? And so it's kind of like a week to date type thing. What I have in the corner over here is the day. So let's say I created this particular thing in the fourth week of the month. So there's still week 4, week 5, which kind of explains why I was projecting for 12 more days. I'm working 6 days a week. So 6 days in week 4, 6 days in week 5. And then what I would do is pretty much once Monday is finished, I would write the number 1. And what that would do is pretty much it would take this graph, or I guess this row, what would happen to this row is it would kind of just multiply all of these stats by 1. Or if Tuesday had finished and now we're looking into Wednesday, this number would be 2, and so just multiply all of these numbers by 2 and kind of spit them out here. So that way, as I'm moving through the week, my week to date, I know where I should be. And then it will also do the same with the best case. What you can see from this particular graph is that at the end of the week, I was actually behind in cash. I wanted to be at 63K, ended up at 51 instead. And so what actually happened, you'll see in the last week when I did the same thing on the Monday, the required amount of cash per day increased from 9K a day to 11 to make up for that deficit. So that way you're just on track and you know what you actually need to do. And then there's a third component to it. This is the month to date. So what this will do is it will then take the weekly stuff, and it'll actually add the previous weeks as well. So what my current stats are and what it should reflect. So that's the input output equation. That's what I would do. The second thing is actually the data tracking. So this looks super complex, but I just fill it out at the end of my day. It's part of my own EOD. Pretty self-explanatory, right? Hours scheduled to work. So how I kind of have a bunch of timers that I use, like Hormozi says, right? You just got a stopwatch, you got it going. So this is how many hours I work. This is the second one is, okay, the first one is how many hours I sat at my desk. The second one is how many of those hours that I sat at my desk I was actually working. And then the third one is RGA. So sales, revenue generating activities are things that are actually moving the needle forward. So that's not meetings, admins, call reviews, stuff like that, QC. So excluding all that, what was RGA activities? The rest is pretty self-explanatory. So I just go through this every day, and that way through all of this stuff, it will automatically update these type of stats. But yeah, so that's that. And then the final component is actually my efficiency. So unlike the top one over here, where we're pretty much looking at the end goal and reverse engineering my inputs, this looks at, according to the number of inputs that I put in, what output should I have expected? So we'll kind of go through this just as an example to really end it off. So I had 39 slots open in the last week. Of that, I got 26 booked out. You can see that in the best case scenario, it would be 31. So my sit rate, it wasn't as high as it should have been. So there's kind of a drop off over there. Then if you look at the total number of calls, this was 20. Now you're going to have to do some percentages over here, but it kind of looks like 27 on 31. That's a whole lot higher of a percentage than 20 on 26. So that means my show rate was definitely dropped as well compared to what would be ideal. And then scrolling further down, then you look at the number of units. So over here, 21, 14, 18. So worst case scenario, I should have ended up with 14 if I had 39 units, 39 slots open. I ended up with 18. Could have ended up at 21. I think 21 on 27, 18 on 20. Actually, my conversion on this is probably higher than what the best case scenario was. So it's just for me to reflect, well, moving into the next week, all right, looks like the main drop up was actually the show rate. And then I also do it for the month. This gives me a better idea. So I had 170 slots open for the entire month. Of that, 140 booked. So that's actually better than the best case scenario. 116 showed, which is, as you can see, there's a huge drop off in the percentage. And then there was a bigger drop off in my units. Sorry, my sets, my units, because units should have been around 57. I ended up around 40. It was actually 37, so this is wrong. And so it shows that the main drop off was actually my conversion rate. So that's how I know I got to tweak that. That's pretty much everything. That's everything I did to be able to get the results that I did. All the trackers. I know we didn't get really tactical with the actual calls and what I did on calls, but that would probably be for next week's video. Cool.